topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the host and their guests, and not those of W4CS Radio, its employees, or affiliates. W4CS makes no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for listening to the Cancer Support Network on W4CS.com.
Good day, and welcome to another pause moment where we just take a moment to honestly take some time to think about life, you know what I mean, and all the crazy things that can kind of come with it. But I got to tell you, this day I wake up and honestly not feeling too hot, but not the point. Still, I'm pushing through, right? And so the funniest thing comes awry is that I recognize that today I am definitely riding on the excitement that my daughter is going to her first prom. Granted, junior prom, but the excitement in just picking out the dress. Do I go? Don't I go? All that kind of stuff, you know? And I've realized that we're in a time that it doesn't really matter about who you're going with, if you're going with somebody. It's about just choosing to go and recognizing that it's a time, it's a moment in life to really take into consideration all that, you know, is given to you is something to absorb. And so it's been really cool kind of watching her doing her thing and making us buy shoes and dresses. And is there glitter all over my hallway? Yes. But at the same time, it's kind of cool just to be in this moment. And I just have to say, today I wake up with honestly, the happiness of her that she has within, and just knowing that she's moving forward in life. And I don't know, don't get me all overwhelmed, but all in all, today, Arthi is going to be just coming in just a few minutes late, but at the same time, she shall be with us, and we're going to be discussing happiness, which clearly from my opening, I found a little bit of happiness today, and I had to honestly move myself underneath my famous I choose joy sign today. Why? Because I'm not feeling that great today, to be honest with you. I got dressed 5 seconds ago. Yep. I actually, with my MS, going through a little bit of exacerbation-y period, or some kind of, at least trying to stabilize my MS right now with 6 steroids. Not fun. And it is not the fun ride. And the last 3 days, I've been taking all these meds. Well, the steroids, which is like 1,000 milligrams, but through the IV. Yep. Whoop. And then they just let you crash. No weaning off. Arthi, you know what? This is perfect timing. Want to know why? You sent me a text this morning concerned about how I'm doing, and I'm answering how I'm doing. And so I was just talking about that, how they give you these IV steroids, 1,000 milligrams for like 3 days, right? And then they just let you crash. No weaning off. So there's like this burn that kind of comes all into your different lymph nodes and different areas of your body and stuff like that. So I have been trying to figure out how to deal with the burn in the midst of doing this podcast, or maybe even just getting up this morning. so so I was loving the fact that we were kind of talking about this soaking up happiness thing, because let me just do a quick clip, right? So Ali, I know I'm getting ready to go into these infusions, so I'm not excited about it. And so I'm like, I can't even think of like what what we could be talking about this week. She says, soaking up happiness. And just like that. And it was just quick, simple, did not stop, like, didn't think a minute, just soaking up happiness. So I'm like, well, let me get on the thing right now. And we have a turtle, right? So, of course, why are you saying all these turtles on the thing, right? Is because we realize that they're just basking in the sun that's not real. Right? And it's like, well, that is exciting, right? So she decides to honestly do a whole long, probably altogether about 25-minute clip, which today I would have ran the whole thing if you weren't here. But at the same time, you just got to catch the beginning of this, because it's just simple, and if we can kind of do this. So I think Juan has it all kind of set up there for me.
Good to see you.
Good seeing you too.
And now it's like taking a bath, but like in happiness. But not a real bath. And like well, it's like
So I catch her kind of at the end of that clip, right? Honestly, being focused in other areas, but then still trying to get back present into the moment. Because I feel like a lot of this thought process of even happiness gets distracted a lot of the times. You know what I mean? And so she was wanting to talk about how it's just really like taking this bath, and she just goes on, and then she goes into breath work. She's like, and so sometimes you just need to breathe, and she starts counting and bringing us up and bringing us down. And it was just like, okay, she's picking up on some of the things that I'm trying to do in this whole journey. But it's been kind of cool seeing how her mind has been thinking about happiness, and how this week I see a little bit of different pep in her attitude. You know what I mean? It's just, she's kind of absorbing some of that thought process of happiness, and being able to really grab onto the different things around. Because I brought her what was it, a cucumber the other day, and she was like, oh, this is a healthy snack. I appreciate that. I was dying. Like the little things, the little things that we did that she thinks of. So, but how have you been doing?
First of all, before I even go there, like, that was so cute. Well, you know that I love kids, but that's not even. When she was thinking about things, I just love the space when kids are thinking, and like she was right there, like absorbing what she was saying, but thinking, and it's really neat to witness that on a video.
On a video. Oh, yeah. This morning, it just kind of uplifted me listening to her thinking about it. And she ends it with, oh, and I got to tell you one more thing. Mm-hmm. Compromise. And she was like, in my head, I'm thinking to myself, where is she going with this? Right. And she's talking about how compromise is a choice, for two people to be happy together. And I was like, go girl. I got to work that out.
I love it because, sorry, well, there are some trucks in Bayreuth. Where I am, there's sand that's being transferred to the other side. Don't get me started on this. I'm like, this project should have happened probably in the cold months, and they're deciding to do them. Whatever. So I'll kind of put myself on and off mute so you don't have to listen to that truck noise. But It's interesting you say this, Daria, because I think it is the fact that we have so much to learn from our children, and we always think it's the vice versa, right? You and I talk a lot about this a lot, that we learn so much from
Yep.
them. And the first is just that, like she said, bath, like the real bath. And actually, my mom would talk about this soaking in the tub. I have a dear friend of mine who encourages me to do the deep soak. And if you think about the 80s and 90s videos of people chilling, they're usually in the bathtub with some candle, whatever, right? But
Right.
it's like we're in the element of water.
Mm-hmm.
You're chilling.
Right.
And it's so true, right? And so it's interesting that that's what she said, and I think it's really, really awesome.
How it surrounds you and consumes you, and how you actually embrace it. You know what I mean? As it's coming at you. I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think when I was like thinking about how society is functioning, I feel like we're definitely pushing the wrong things. Like we're not thinking about how what we're saying, what we're doing is causing more and more stress and the unhappiness and just perpetuating inner, uh, you know. And I think we see that the stress levels are going up everywhere, and especially even in the schools now. Rates of depression are high, additionally, anxiety. And I know now, probably, I don't know how many high school students that talk about their anxiety. You know what I mean? Like that's their term. They know whether it's full anxiety, whatever it is, overwhelmed, whatever. But some are experiencing, or a lot are experiencing, true signs of anxiety. You know what I mean? And then if you just look at the insanity, um, when we're not focusing on mental health aspects of things, right? And then we see suicide doubling itself in all areas. There's something that in the equation we're missing, and I feel like we need to be figuring out how to get more focus on in the school systems, additionally in our daily what we see on TV, to be able to bring it forward. We're trying to do it, but how many is it hitting, and they're understanding why we're talking about just being happy? Like, do we know how it affects us in our health, in our productivity, in how we feel about ourselves in reference to self-esteem, how it changes a society across the board with just a little bit of happiness? I was thinking about mirroring, and how if I'm happy and upbeat, you're going to be probably more happy and upbeat as well. And if that chain of or ripple effect could just keep rippling and rippling. But when we're starting with negative thought process, most of the time, like we said in even previous podcasts, 75 to 85% of what we think about in a day is negative thought process. Beget what? You know what I mean? I think it's really hard for us to be able to overlook some of what we're creating as well. But then also, I don't think we have a good understanding in reference to the definitions of happiness as opposed to pleasure.
You said that because I love the room you're in today. I love all the rooms you're in, but interesting enough, you have I choose joy on your backdrop.
Mm-hmm.
I always love that one because happiness is definitely awesome, but it's not the true fulfillment. You and I have had this conversation, like it's that joy is and if you think about, actually, not to bring religion into it, but you don't hear a lot of scripts talking about happiness, but you'll hear a lot of joyful or joy, right? And so
One of the fruits.
yes,
Exactly.
one of fruits, exactly. So even Buddhist principles, Christianity, I think you know where I'm going with this.
For sure.
That the link of, so this idea of happiness is a fleeting, right? It's almost like, I don't know about you, Daria, I consider like, okay, I want to get up in the morning and I want to be positive and like, um one of the things that one of the gurus that I've sometimes follow, Sadhguru, which is the seeker of happy of Sad meaning seeker of truth is what that translates in Sanskrit. But sometimes I listen to his little 5-minute podcast because he's funny and he's a wealth of experience. But he just highlighted, if you get up in the morning and you start with a smile, try to do that before you engage with your phone or before we think we have to go. So I'm trying my best, right? Just to start or be grateful. We've heard the grateful. But in that moment, that happiness reset then can help to get to the longer string of that joy that because joy is actually a timeline, in my opinion, like to get.
Yes, I totally agree. As you're talking, right, I'm thinking about how I was listening to my favorite Audible book kind of deal. That's how I get through some books. But at the same time, I was thinking about how one of the authors, and I can't remember the name of the book. It's about as soon as it comes back to me, I'll definitely bring it back to you. But at the same time, he was talking about how 3 minutes in the morning of negative news, okay, they found that 6 hours later, I think it was like 27% of people were more likely to report that they had a negative day, a bad day. So 27% of people, after watching just 3 minutes, just shifted their day, how it could have turned out. That's crazy. I was amazed by that. I was totally amazed by that. But then I thought to myself, well, how are we training our brains? We are training our brains just to the negative, and how do we shift that? Just last week, we were talking about habits, right? Well, if we're talking about habits and we're creating these negative habits to consistently be blaring into our heads, we're actually creating a total shift in our brains and how we're thinking on a consistent basis. This is not just for the moment, you know what I mean? This is now how you tend to become. And so I thought it was quite amazing to just kind of think about that whole fact of how much just that little bit of time, that moment, can shift the whole everything. And I think in reference to the things that you go through, you could have an argument with a person, it could last 3 minutes, but the whole day was horrible from there. You know what I mean? The whole day you could not even absorb. I'm sorry, Arthi, were you about to say something? I know I just kind of got on a rampage. But all in all, I think when we're well, so this is one question I had for you, right? If we're talking about like being afraid of happiness, could you say that like in society we could possibly be afraid to be happy at times? That is clearly not helpful to the equation.
I love this question, by the way.
You know what I mean? Because I think when we're talking about being too ambitious, you know what I mean? I feel like we put these strongholds on our ability and our ability to grow. You know what I mean? And I realize that sometimes we'll say like, okay, I don't want to get too excited. I don't want to get too excited about it because, it's not going to happen, right? Or you want your kid to calm down, to don't act up in class, don't get too excited, because it's limiting. You know what I mean? And so I just always was thinking about how much that thought process can shift your pursuit for happiness. Like, well, why drive to even do that? And especially when we change the goalposts anyway, half the time, because we could achieve the goal and we still won't fully grab onto that because we're moved the goalpost a little bit further out on our own selves, not to mention what anybody else in society could possibly do. So it's just amazing.
I think you are onto something, because while you were talking, of course, I was trying to stay present, focused, but I will be honest with you, I did get distracted in my own little egotistical mind. So I just want to remind you all, it's not easy always to try to actively listen, because our mind does go off and you have to bring it back in.
Girl,
Well, it's because I really do think I'm losing my train of thought. We all do it, right? Because
and
a story of life. I'm trying to figure out, do we write it down? I don't know. Anyways, Daria, what came up in that question was, it reminded me of when we just talk about grief, joy, grief, happiness, joy, right?
mm-hmm.
So feeling around grief is when we feel guilty. We feel guilty for feeling a certain way. And I'm not just talking about somebody passing, but even just if there's, for instance, we had a tornado 2 weeks ago, and there's this, the street up the road was Category 3, got hit really hard. And so, we pass by and see debris, and then there's some people who might be having a party next door, and you're trying to think, is that the right thing to do? They cancel some things after school, right? Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to say to you is, I think there's this level of like finding, for instance, some Ukrainian populations who live here. I remember they would share, it's hard for me to find happiness and joy while I have my family back home who is in a war zone. How can I celebrate my child's birthday? Or like, so I share this grief cycle with you because I think you're right. Like, I think there's this balance of feeling guilty for having happiness when, if you are someone who's kind of emotionally in tune and empathetic, you're going to be thinking, even if you're not, you might be afraid of happiness because it's so fleeting. And then you're like, well, I don't want it anyways. I'd rather be negative now because it's easier sometimes, right? Because you just shared that statistic that we've been talking about. It's already wild to be negative, so you can easily stay there. And Daria, no offense, I was thinking sometimes I don't like the word lazy, but actually humans are lazy.
Right.
You have to work on snapping out of laziness, especially nowadays.
Well, yeah. We'll hold on to something, a label or something like that in a second, because it's easier to do that than actually get within and deep enough to figure out what it is. One thing I was just thinking about was rose-colored glasses. You know how I always talked about, you're looking through rose-colored glasses. And I think there is a spectrum to it, you know what I mean, in reference to happiness. And then additionally now this blindsided, being blind, and so there's got to be a fine line between the two. But I think you got to recognize that sugarcoating, the present moment tends to lead to like bad, decisions down the road. You know what I mean? Because we don't, because if I think about, when you're a teenager, right? And it's like tonight, she's going to go out, everything, if she thought to herself, everything's going to be great and this and that and the other thing, and she was living in that fantasy, and then she got there and something went, then how does that create a whole now way of consistently thinking about how things are going to be when you go to big events or something like that, or around certain people or whatever. And so I think you have to be able to recognize that there's going to be this level of discernment that you need to make in reference to this happiness. But I feel like it's between, I guess they call it rational optimism, you know what I mean? And basically figuring out between real, you know what I mean, and additionally this ideal or optimistic world, you know what I mean? Where do they meet? And a lot of the times that is hard because that's that getting within, you know, getting inside to figure out, well, okay, why am I so optimistic, right? But then also, why don't I want to be a realist? Or additionally, why am I so real that I can't even be optimistic? You know, and then how does that really affect your ability to be ever happy or feel like that it's okay to choose joy? You know, and I think we got to figure out within ourselves, like really where that lies. I I've noticed though that one thing is that recognizing what we do within, you know, and how much it chains and connects with the broader base. You know what I mean? How I wake up in the morning as opposed to um well, okay, so if I wake up in the morning and my attitude is stanky, how do you think that whole house is going to be? Right? Additionally, if I wake up that next morning and I'm all peachy keen, how could that be? But then also maybe my husband doesn't wake up peachy keen. So now he's shifting it too. So we got to recognize how we affect each other in our choices to not necessarily, you know, breathe the fresh air. Additionally, just pause for a moment and just get things into perspective. I think that is one thing that is a hard thing for anybody to just easily do anyway, especially when you're in the midst, right? And we're talking about day to day, right? Maybe I'm not feeling good today, but if we're talking about like the loss of someone, something that's not ever coming back, how do you stay in joy then? How do you consistently be reminded of this loss, right? But at the same time, recognize that life still moves on, and shall it be negative? That's it. I'm honestly, I'm dumbfounded at that sometimes when I see a person that comes into my office at the funeral home and they're able to even be there making the arrangements. You know what I mean? Outside of that, getting up on the day of the funeral service. Wait, don't get up there and speak, right? Because you're blowing me out the water at that moment, right? Oh, wait, you're still moving on. I see you at church. I see you in the grocery store. I see you at the next funeral, and you're still moving forward. And so it gives me this reality that, okay, there's a tomorrow, right? After these losses, but the lens I will look through it, it's hazy at the beginning. You know what I mean? That's got to be a hazy beginning lens. Like, and people always talk about how, you know, when we're in you know, different situations, it's, well, what lens are you looking through? Well, whoa, I can't even, it's all blurry. I don't even see through a lens. You know what I mean? So like, what are you talking about? And I think that's hard for the others that are trying to support us to really get, you know, to really be able to be of full support and understanding when they can't necessarily even embrace that you wouldn't be able to see it their way or this way or a way. And everybody's grief is obviously all different, you know, but just recognizing that how much grief we actually experience in a day to day. People always look at grief as a loss of somebody, but it comes with a whole bunch of other things throughout the day that can be frustrating and seem, but they shifted things. And so it's just recognizing that through some of this grieving period, there's this level of intention, you know what I mean? To be, if you're wanting to be happy, there's this level of intention that comes with it in reference to what you have to kind of do to be able to mentally to be able to get there. I I hope that sometimes when I walk into a room, if I'm like, keeping my upbeat, that I can shift the room. You know what I mean? And I've seen it. I've seen it happen. And not to shift it in too far, you know what I mean? That it's out of its proper perspective, but at the same time to shift it enough that it puts some lax, some ease to the stress that comes in the moment. And it becomes, sometimes you think about the negative, it can become like just like secondhand smoke. You know what I mean? But it's the same thing when we're talking about how the positive can work. Totally.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah. You know what? They did this study on basically in Framingham, Massachusetts. There was this huge study for years in reference to heart disease, right? And basically it was looking at how the changes in heart disease within one specific community, Framingham, right? How it changed over time. And it started to look like it was following like a viral pattern, right? So it was like, okay, there was somebody got heart disease here. Then all of a sudden somebody had it here, right? And then it was following this trail. And so they realized, oh, wait, what's going on here? Why is it following this kind of pattern? And so we were realizing how much environmentally, you know what I'm saying, our surroundings were affecting us, whether it was the people that we were interacting with, not just, oh, okay, their heart disease rubbed off on mine, right? No, but are we eating the same foods? Are we drinking the same water? Are we breathing the same air? Are we, having the same beat? Are we on the same vibe? You know what I mean? And they also recognize that if you have a friend that got divorced, right? You're 50% more likely to have a divorce yourself. They said obesity, if you had an obese sibling, there could be a 30% increase in your likelihood of being obese as well. I said, well, golly, it's so crazy how much, you know what I mean, we rub off on each other. And how we're not recognizing how much this negative that's floating through the air of our society, and that we keep seeing it breeding deeper and deeper and deeper, has come from our mindsets.
It's so true. Yeah. And you're right, like the space that we take
Right.
on. But I do
Right.
have a question for you, Daria, while you were talking.
Yeah, hit it.
Okay, so when it comes to grief and loss issues, sometimes we don't sit on, I feel like we don't want to sit with that on. It's uncomfortable, right? That loss is it just hits so hard and it's so uncomfortable. And then you're trying to seek out this happiness, joy factor.
Mm-hmm.
I apologies for the noise, but
no, we don't hear it. I don't hear it as much.
Okay. And I'm just sharing with you because I feel like sometimes that's where, even with postpartum women, the isolation that occurs for people with grief and loss, postpartum, even if you're not diagnosed with postpartum depression, just there's so much isolation around these significant. And then, of course, with our seniors, our children who are neurodivergent, learn a different way, or
right.
Kids who are ostracized if they look a certain. I think you get where I'm going with this, right? Like,
totally.
Because we want to be, this is what everybody says, we want to be around positive polys, because then you're right, it's energy, right? You know, going into a room when you can feel that heaviness,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that level, but then is it okay that we learn to sit with unhappiness to get to happiness and joy? I guess that's a really long-winded question, but I think it's back to this whole idea of this construct around grief and loss and like.
Well, I feel like, and this is the crazy thing, and I feel like over time it's gotten twisted, and that's why it sounds bad, right?
Mhm.
Is that the reality of life, right? If I didn't feel, what would I be? An inanimate object, right? Would I be dead? So if I didn't feel, right? If my feeling, right, is connected to meaning, and it's connected to something that I value, that I love, that I was blessed to have, right? It's going to be hard when you obviously lose that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you're not going to want to necessarily continue to be able to, um, you know, stay in this joyful aspect of life all the time. You know what I mean? And additionally, sometimes there's this time that you should wallow, right? And really come into grips of like, why does this person or this thing mean so much to me? Right? Like, acknowledging that there's stress that you're experiencing, but you don't turn a blind eye to it, but you got to reconnect with like why the stress is a stress.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that it leads to the whole meaning of why there's pain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because honestly, if you didn't have love in the picture, you probably, I mean, like, if you think about it, do you think that grief can exist without love?
Mm-mm.
Right.
I've had this conversation before.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. I mean,
Right.
because I know, like, Sunday's Mother's Day, and I walked into Kroger, Daria, and of course, I'm excited. I think it's a great day just to whatever to be some days like Father. Yeah, I do think we do, but then I also think we over commercialize some of our days. So I'm trying to find this balance. Long story short,
Right.
I'm like literally at Kroger, Daria, and I'm almost, not that I'm having a meltdown, but I'm like, there were all these balloons and flowers and all this stuff, and I was just like, then I went into this place and I told my own girls, I was like, if I have moments on Sunday where I'm just not okay, I just want you to know I love being your mom, but I also miss my mom.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
you see what I'm saying? It's this double-edged sword. Of course, I'm happy. I'm celebrating myself as a mother, but then there's this loss, and then it hits me hard. Like, when am I going to come to a point where something that's a celebration kind of day, I don't take as hard? But you know what, Daria? Like, everything in each day, if I tell my kids, what's your highlight, low light, grateful, whatever, then how am I even saying that for these celebration days that they're not supposed to be days of joy? Like this dichotomous pair.
Right. So, like, as I'm listening to you, I hear you like talking about it from like a third person. You know what I mean? Because it's you trying to figure out how to integrate.
Mhm.
And the thing is, that's hard because you have to be at the stage of integration. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't just come and you're like, okay, I'm just going to be happy with it. That I got a day, this day and that day, and I'm supposed to just be happy. No. And that's what you're experiencing as quote unquote time, right? And it's not, this is where the little things that will happen in time, right? Is that the integration thought process, even the inkling of letting it in, the moment of joy gets a little bit okay. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So now, right, you're on the day of how do you create something, right, that integrates your pain and your love.
Mhm.
Fine line.
fine line is right. And Daria, being patient to know like every year is going to be different. I don't remember experiencing this last year. And sometimes we think that the years go by, you know, I'm close to the 4-year mark, like that and we do this, right? Time will heal.
No,
Right? But
that doesn't.
then
Because it doesn't. Because you know why? If we're talking about we have early grief, acute grief, mature grief. Mature grief lasts forever. Why? Because love, you ain't never not loving, right? So that's why it's got to find its match. It's got to find its integration. You know what I mean? It's got to figure out where you can have Mother's Day and have the pain, but you've already done step one. You've communicated it, right? Especially to the two people that could feel the vibe.
my husband was there too, so all of them heard me.
All of them all know, right? So you all know that there's this this shift that could come into play, but there's an anticipated aspect of what you're doing too, right? You don't know where you're going to be on that in that moment, right? But at the same time, you know you're hurting right now, because that's another thing. You expressed that because you were hurting then, right? You were already hurting.
I thought it was. I'm not. Listen, this is why I share this openly, because there are times when I feel like it must, and I'm not an alcoholic, but I share this with you because someone in recovery must think, oh my gosh, like in my grief cycle, I've like, where do I keep coming back to this and not being over it? And so then I go down this rabbit hole, like that feeling of, why wouldn't I be excited about seeing a bunch of balloons and why does it, Daria, I'm not somebody who gets bothered by like, so I love celebrations. I love balloons. I mean, I don't want flowers for myself. If somebody says fine. But do you see what I'm saying? That
it's not because it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about it's not the object, it's the relationship. There's an unfinished relationship that you have there, right? There's something that you would have wanted to do different, more, or better. Yeah, or not even more, just like different, more, or for a longer. I feel like there's always this like something that's not finished in a relationship that needs to be finished. You know what I mean? And that is a journey to walk through. And that's why they even have so many like great grief counselors out there that can help you walk through to get through those the specific unfinished relationship aspect of things, because like you're you're not going to get over your mom. Like, I'm sorry, I cannot see.
I agree with you on that. I think I think honestly, maybe it's the fact that I'm not trying to predict every, but who knows? It just may be that those days are. I said some days are going to be harder than others, right? Like maybe that's
every day. Your mom was part of your life for every day before, right? Every day there's going to be a day that she'll pop in or she'll pop out in your thought process. At the same time, how is it, driving or moving your ship? You know what I mean? Like when it becomes to an unhealthy point where you're not able to do or move forward or whatever, but going through the thought process and feeling the pain and allowing yourself, because Mother's Day is Mother's Day. It has a lot of significance, but it's the connect, because we put this label on it, right? But every day is Mother's Day for you. You see what I'm saying? Every day is Mother's Day.
When I was driving past a church today, it said a mother's hug lasts way more than even when you're held in the physical. I'm not saying it right. I remixed it myself.
I know what you mean, but yeah.
Past the physical sense, right? What'd you say?
No, I was just.
Oh yeah, remix. Everything's
right.
I don't get quotes right, but that's okay. But Daria, and that's what it comes down to. Why I'm sharing this and why I think it's important to discuss is I think it comes down to like we are always, that shame and guilt concept do consume us. And so when we get stuck on not just being present, like now I'm sitting here, I'm like, it's okay, forgive yourself, you're human. Then I come back to that self-compassion and then I'm okay. And then I'm like, okay, then I can go to of course I live in joy. It is okay, but I'm human. I'm supposed to. And this is what the Buddhist principles talk about, right? Like the idea, and even our religious texts, like, wait a minute, what is joy? Like, what is real joy? Joy is like you said,
Right.
feeling all the feels.
Right. Right. Feeling all the feels.
Feeling all the feels. So, Daria, we're in Mental Health Month. Like, what is it that we don't want to feel? Remember, I teased, was it last week about like we're always trying to get to happy hour?
Yeah.
Friday happy hour. Girl, why is it like, is it because we're so miserable and it sucks so bad? Like,
Listen, they have these things called like, what are they called? Sturbs, but basically they're, yeah, exactly. So they take us kind of totally out of what we think, what we actually think we're getting through or getting over things, but at the same time we're eating ourselves, or maybe we're drinking, or maybe we're shopping, or maybe we're this. And I feel like those type of things are just the distractions, you know what I mean, that tend to elongate our ability to even recognize that we need to focus, on where we're really at. You know what I mean? Like, where am I really? Because I can walk and wake up every day and do the same monotonous thing, or I could get intentional about, like, okay, how am I dealing with the fact that I'm, having a MS thing? How am I dealing with the fact that, I've lost my mother? How am I dealing with the fact that I don't have my job? You know what I mean? How am I dealing with the fact that what, and really getting into how you're dealing, because some of how you're dealing is perpetuating the cyclical process, right? I might be eating more, so now I'm causing myself to get overweight. Now I don't like how I look. Now I don't like how I feel. Now I don't like how I da da da. And that was not the initial issue at the beginning. It was, I lost my mom, and dang, I should be sad,
totally.
because what the
I
heck?
love saying this because this is the fact. Most of us we do all want to engage in authenticity and transparency, but then we don't actually like allow ourselves because then we're not, society doesn't like it. That's why we have to, Daria, all the things we talk about are literally flipping society on its head upside down and knocking it up some.
Oh,
Right?
definitely.
Like,
Definitely.
knock, knock, who's there? Where's the communal like fire circles? Like, so we're getting back to that. The summer people love being around the fire pit. That's what Native Americans do, right? Like, they have ceremonial circles. So there you go, right? And then, we're all trying to get to that idea of, okay, let me grieve by myself, let me grieve my community. But then I also think it's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I just think it's this idea of we have to come to terms with the fact of feeling all the feels.
Feeling all the feels. And just to, we got to kind of round it up right now, but I meant, and I always try to give a tribute to my husband John with his definitions, right? And so, not necessarily in the like Webster's, but at the same time, I found a definition within this psychology manual in reference to happiness. And I think that it really does change my perspective of like what I'm supposed to be doing in my pursuit of happiness, right? And the definition was the joy you feel moving forward to your potential. The joy you feel moving forward to your potential, right? So we're still doing something to get that feeling of joy, right? We're those creating moments or achieving our goals. So, I mean, I just thank you guys for pausing with us for a moment to just go through that thought process. And
I like this whole feeling all the feels, you all, because I think that's where you get to the happiness and joy, in my opinion.
Totally. And bringing us into Mother's Day, I think a lot of us obviously need that little bit of juice. So I'm going to go soak in my bath.
Oh, nice. Go for it. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Daria.
Blessings.